What were my 10 favourite fiction books of 2023? I read a lot of fiction, a lot of some other stuff as well, and I've narrowed it down more or less by looking at Goodreads and looking at what I marked as 5 stars. There are 12 series or books. I've condensed any series where I gave multiple 5 stars. I've condensed it down to one entry, and and I've got 12 of those. I'm going to do a top 10 with a bit more discussion and 2 honorary mentions to start it. Where, by the way, where it's the same author but different series or works, there'll be distinct entries. Honorary mention number 1, Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, the Elder, Dumas Père. I haven't put a review of this up yet, but I will in the coming week. This is very good fun, very good action. Has a very weird section where it slows down a lot, which isn't ideal, but it's such good fun that it makes up for it. And Discworld books, basically, Witches Abroad, Weird Sisters and Men at Arms by Terry Pratchett. And my favourite, which were rereads and all got 5 stars from me. My favourite, which is Witches Abroad. It's funny, it's thought-provoking, the characterisation is good. And I look forward to reading another 2 or 3 in the coming year, in 2024. I'll have to do a TBR video as well, I guess, to talk about some of that. Top 10. At 10, we'll start with, pardon me, the first of a few entries by Gene Wolfe, The Wizard Knight, aka the books Knight, the Knight and the Wizard, which is 2 parts about a young man in his teens who goes to a magical realm consisting of 7 levels of reality, and he ascends, descends, goes and does different things, becomes a brave knight. It compares it to, on the back, to Once and Future King and A Wizard of Earthsea, and it has glosses, it has blurbs from Neil Gaiman and Tad Williams. This... I think that there are some slow sections to this. I reviewed the book separately at the time. There are slow sections to this, but there are a few things in its favour, many things in its favour indeed. One, it does pay off everything, all the slowness, with a triumphant conclusion, one of the best Gene Wolfe conclusions. The world, the creation of the world is magnificent, of this kind of fairyland, but also lands of Norse myth, and hints of higher and lower worlds as well as a kind of Arthurian realm. And it deals with kind of issues around honour, character, courage, chivalry, really interestingly. And when you realise how Gene Wolfe thought about those things and read some of his stuff on Tolkien for that, you see he's trying to work out an important ethical theme for him here about, knighthood being in a sense a human ideal, and how flawed people are to achieve that ideal. Wizard Knight was very good. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. It is, relatively speaking, a more approachable Wolfe. It is for anyone who can cope with Tad Williams or Robin Hobb. You can cope with the Wizard Knight, though you'll find there are lots of Wolfian tricks, confusions, and odd digressions and things he's doing, which you don't entirely get why he's doing them until maybe they pay off for you, and maybe you have to go and read Reddit for more. Number 9, I read these with my kids. Just the second Jungle Book. The first Jungle Book I think I gave 4 stars to. The second Jungle Book, they're both very good, and if you're going to read number 2, you're going to read number 1, aren't you? But they are a selection, a mixture. Half of each is about Mowgli and his adventures, and half of them is just about other stories based on Kipling's experience of India and elsewhere. There's an Arctic story in each as well that's not set in India. The second Jungle Book, it's interesting. It's much like my experience of reading Kim, in fact listening to Kim, which I reviewed a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, which was a great Kipling book, is that you can think, is Kipling, are these just adventure books? Are they fables? Or whatever, and you realise Kipling is a literary writer of the absolutely highest mark. There's not really getting away from how good he is once you've read him. You're talking about one of the best novelists in English ever. And Part of the trick is that even in Kim, which is a longer and more obviously serious book, he writes with a lightness of touch and a humour that can deceive you. But what you see develop out of these charming and interesting and fun episodes are often works of real power and insight into human character. And in the second Jungle Book, this is sort of matched also by stuff you begin to see in Tiger Tiger, the last Mowgli story in the first Jungle Book. But you start to see the development of, a real insight into Mowgli's character, Mowgli as a picture of an archetypal human. In a sense, Mowgli is, amongst all of Kipling's works, his Tom Bombadil, in a literary sense of being a key to something. But where Bombadil is archetypal, he's simply there, Mowgli develops. And I think Red Dog and The Spring Running are simply magnificent stories, some of the best short stories you'll ever read. So yeah, I highly rate The Jungle Book, really enjoyed reading them with my kids. 8, some of these could be anywhere, this could definitely be higher. Master and Commander by Patrick O'Brien. I'm hoping to read the second book in the Aubrey Maturin series, which is called Post Captain soon. I've bought the third. This is an intellectually serious sharp or hornblower. They're great fun, those books. Here we've got to step into one that's just a little bit more intense, a little more demanding, but pays off with great characters, great action, great depiction and evocation of the naval life. Quite realistic and doesn't pretend anything. There's something very unglamorous at points, but which shows you why it was seen and is seen still by some few as the most exciting thing imaginable. And certainly at that point in the age of sail, and Aubrey Maturin, Jack Aubrey, Stephen Maturin are great characters. They are, they are luminous figures of a distinctive type each, but really living. They're not a stereotype. They are people. Number 7, also a reread. Use of Weapons, which is culture novel number 3, maybe. This is one of the best culture novels, I think. I haven't read a couple of the later ones, and I'll need to, like the last couple. But Use of Weapons has advantages that some of those books don't have. It's not very long. It seems relevant to me. It is, under 400 pages. It has an incredibly clever structure that is reasonably easy to follow once you catch what's going on. There are some interesting things about how time is presented, where narratives are, so that's all I'll say for that. But it's not super hard. And it presents us with compelling characters and compelling situations set against the background of this utopian communistic space society that's wonderful, but which there's very dirty things going on around its fringe to deal with the real price of peace. And the central characters are terribly compelling for all that. And I think, it's short, it has a clear plot, and it has clear central characters, which, in terms of the culture, which I think is a great series, and I've highly recommended on this channel, you have books which are quite long, you have books which are very dense and complex, like Accession, obvious one there, or a couple of the last couple actually as well, like Matter. But here you have both a shorter book and a book that is incredibly it's very intense. It has a great density of emotion and action and value, but and very focused. So it gets a lot done. Great book. Really enjoyed it. Number 6. I recently reviewed this, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I read 5 Bradburys this year, something like that, maybe 6. And this was my favourite by far. I liked a lot of the rest. This was the only one to take 5 stars, though. I said to David Wiley, a friend of the channel, and whose channel I greatly enjoy as well, just the other day, that because he's saying it's his favourite too, there's something here that Bradbury is a very purple, flowery, fun writer, evocative, powerful certainly. But here, it's as if he just begins to trim off, and this is a fairly early work, you know, it's published within 10 years of him really starting writing. But it's his first novel of this kind, you know, rather than fix-ups or anything else. It is technically an expansion, but it's not a fix-up. He trims away some of the fat and is just incredibly direct and intense on the value of, you know, what makes us human, the value of art, of civil free discourse, of what a civilized society looks like. And it's funny because you'd think, oh, he's so known for his prose, he's so known for his invention, and this is less inventive in some ways. It has this central idea of a guy whose job is burning books and stopping people from reading begins to be tempted by books. You know, there's Winston Smith thing, but it is a very different story to 1984 for all that. It's a really interesting book. It's very focused, it gets everything done, and it kind of keeps the central plot, which, as I say, for Bradbury isn't always how he does stuff. And it is very powerful. It's very convincing and convicting. Also convincing and convicting, number 5, The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, which is about a guy, a central character, William Mandela, who gets basically involved in a relativistic war where the travel to and from places is relatively short, you know, a few months, but absolutely long. You get back to Earth and years have passed. It means that time just catches up on them, and he sees changes in Earth's society going backwards and forwards. There's a bunch of stuff. One, that there's certainly a working out of Haldeman's view of his experience in the Vietnam War. Very powerfully done. You can engage with it at what level you want, but it's very powerful. And it's also very good at sort of looking at how history works, or at least Haldeman's view of how history works. You know, it's cyclical. There are rises and falls. Many complex factors lead into different political, social changes. And that's part of what you're seeing in terms of, William going backwards and forwards and so on. It's very good sci-fi. It's genuine it's high concept, but it is hard sci-fi in that sense. It does take up a real idea, and then in a new wave way, just spins it into something very human. A bit like Canticle for Leibowitz. So yes, one of my favourite sci-fis of the year, but I think not my favourite sci-fi, but one of mine, and one of my favourite I've read in a long time. Number 4, the second Gene Wolfe entry, Peace, a ghost story about Alden Weir reflecting on his life. There's very weird, there's obviously things are weird. Weird stuff's going on in terms of how he's remembering stuff, how he's presenting stuff. It's Wolfian in that it is mysterious and confusing, and things are being left out. It is actually, it's stylistically one of his, maybe his most beautiful. It's rich and evocative. And because in the late 80s and early 90s, he begins to crunch his word count at his editor's demand. And that creates his kind of middle and late style is very tight and very good too. But his earlier style, he's a very good writer, and Book of the New Sun, famous for being fascinatingly written, but it's very baroque and over the top. Peace is not. Peace is incredibly balanced and elegant, and I loved reading it for that. I think it is morally and imaginatively one of Wolfe's most interesting. I think it is, as far as people approaching Wolfe, it is not necessarily the book you'll be introduced to Wolfe on, but it's not particularly hard. It's just you have to want weird, like something that's actively a mystery rather than simply, in a Wolfian sense, passively a mystery. It is something where you need to really want to start cracking the hints. You need to like your Agatha Christie to enjoy what's going on. It's a great book. It's beautiful. imaginative and moving, and it is something which I found, and there's always debate about the real meaning of Woolf books, what he means for them. I found profoundly hopeful and redemptive for all its darkness. Number 3. The third in the LA Quartet, and the reason why I got into the LA Quartet, the LA Confidential by James Ellroy. I watched the film, one of my favourite films now, magnificent film, and was like, oh, it's a book, is it? And so I read the first 2. I haven't reviewed this yet because I'll just review the whole of it this year when I finish it. But greatly enjoyed the first 2. LA Confidential is a step up, I think, from Black Dahlia and Big Nowhere. LA Confidential, it's interesting to see the film adaptation is very, very savvy about what to keep and what to get rid of cinematically. And arguably it's a bit tighter. LA Confidential itself Ellroy does this in all the books, the 3 books I've read by him. He does it in every book. Multiplies stuff. It's like, here's another thing. Oh, have you considered this subplot? And he just about, he's always wobbling. And in Black Dahlia and Big Nowhere, you're not quite sure he hasn't fallen off somewhere on his unicycle. In LA Confidential, he holds it all together through to the end. It's, great for that. He does pull it off, but the adaptation knows what it's doing with that kind of multiplication of plot threads. It's a dark vision of LA and Hollywood in the 50s. It is gritty. It's certainly gory at points. But a big thing with all these books is he's working out human evil and human good, and he's not hopeless. It's something where I think people see these. It's a classic thing, I think. It's the same with Cormac McCarthy, where I think people misunderstand some of what he's trying to, what the author is trying to say about the human soul and human being. I mean, as if you could read The Road and think it was some hopeless, depressing dirge. But I think the idea that Ellroy says, I tell redemptive tales aimed at women, and he urges, love God, fear God, seek goodness as dark forces assail you. I think there's a lot to that in terms of understanding these books, that these are heroic books about flawed, broken people, generally men. There are some very powerful, important women in these books too, but I mean, the central characters are often these broken, flawed, scarred, traumatized men who work out what honour means in a deeply dishonourable society. These are personal stories. They are redemptive, but they're dark but redemptive tales. In that sense, they remind me a bit of Peace. I've already said there are things there, though Peace is more complex, that remind me of Peace. And I'll finish that this year and give a fuller review of the LA Quartet. But LA Confidential is not just a great movie, but a great book as well. Number 2, Memory by Lois McMaster Bujold, which is book 8, book 9, something like that in the Vorkosigan saga, and is it is really the masterpiece of the series. I've liked a lot of them. I should say, Mirror Dance, I also gave 5 stars to, in terms of within the series. Mirror Dance comes just before this. It's Brothers in Arms, and in the internal chronology, it's Brothers in Arms, Mirror Dance, then Memory. And Mirror Dance was a great sequel to Brothers in Arms, without spoiling what goes on between those two, because they are closely connected. I think Mirror Dance is one of the most compelling psychological books Bujold's written, and this kind of very intense story of a broken character, one of the main characters, dealing with but with an incredibly exciting plot. She's very good at plot. One of the big things about the Vorkosigan saga is, and I don't always see rated highly, is that people say, oh, she's really a character writer, and she is. Or maybe this is all, I like the cultures she writes. She's usually very good at that. But she also has very good sci-fi concepts and a very, generally speaking, very strong hand on the plot. And I'd say that's certainly the case with Mirror Dance. Memory is even better. Memory is, for 60% of the book, deeply reflective, deeply thoughtful. This very kind of soul-searching book about growing up. And it's written in 1998. Bujold's been professionally writing for 15 years or whatever. We're talking about someone who's beginning to reflect on their own work as somewhat, in their own process of this character Miles Vorkosigan. And it's just very, very effective. It's quite moving. It gives itself space. It deals with kind of themes of aging and grief and of finding meaning. And it also pulls out a mystery plot that Bujold spins, she kind of pirouettes into, and it's like, oh, now we're doing this. And the funny thing is, she just about gets away with resolving that, the first main beats of that and the internal plot, the kind of Miles thinking about stuff plot, and then turns into a kind of quite exciting ending. But yeah, it's very good. It's very good, and I recommend you read. I've talked about the Vorkosigan saga a lot here. Certainly recommend you read it. I don't think you should start there, but it's worth reading the Vorkosigan saga if nothing else to get there. Number 1, Book of the Short Sun, Gene Wolfe. No surprise to those I've spoken to. On Blue's Waters, In Green's Jungles, and Return to the Wall. I'm still at the kind of the big Wolfian scholarship stuff where you're trying to work out every single beat of the timeline and plot. I'm still really going on that and trying to work out half of it, reading what people are saying. And so in a way, the reason this is my favourite book of the year is not because I'm so interested in how it resolved all the plot points and I've learnt all this stuff, though there was that a little bit, but just these 3 books are deeply, deeply beautiful books. They're haunting books. They're fascinating books. They're not where to start with Wolfe. Certainly, there's some of perhaps his most complex books. You need to read Book of the New Sun, Book of the Long Sun, Earth of the New Sun, the short stories, etc. Well, you don't need to read the short stories, but you need to read at least Book of the New Sun, Earth of the New Sun, and Book of the Long Sun to read these. It's gated behind 9 books. Therefore, it's underread, underappreciated. But there has never been a more triumphant conclusion on its own terms to any series ever. It's one of the great cycles, the solar cycle by Wolfe, and this is a magnificent conclusion. It's knotty and complex, but there are just so many things, and it's funny because though I think he's often profoundly powerful and moving indeed. What really struck me was how often I just had to put the book down, partly to reflect on it. I always do that with Wolfe. I always put it down and think, whoa, what's going on? But to reflect, but also just to feel, to experience. I didn't even understand the stuff that was going on sometimes. I was like, is this? But it is subliminal in the sense that it is touching on the sublime. There's this thing where sometimes you just get what's going on. You're like, oh, I don't completely get the exoteric meaning, but if you like, the esoteric thing is easier than the exoteric. I get the subtext here. I get that there's something powerful and special and spiritual here. A story about someone who knows themselves to be flawed and weak, but who lives out a life of trying to do the opposite, trying to do good, and other people recognizing that. And this person changing the world as they go around. I think this is a good, this is a good time to say of Wolfe. Just quote Michael Swanwick, who I don't think actually pops up on many of the blurbs, but does on these short sun print on demands by Tor, which is great, by the way. That if you're not going to be able to keep a book in print, getting it on Amazon print on demand is so good if it's worthwhile, like here. But Gene Wolfe is the greatest writer in the English language alive today. No longer alive, he died in 2019. Let me repeat that. Gene Wolfe is the greatest writer in the English language alive today. Among living writers, there is nobody who can even approach Gene Wolfe for brilliance of prose, clarity of thought, and depth in meaning. And Short Sun is his master. I've read half his books now, half his novels, and Short Sun is amongst those his masterpiece. I cannot commend it. If you're saying, oh, where should I start with Wolfe? You can't start there. You've got to read these 9 other books. I'd also say that if you're thinking, I'd like some of the things that Wolfe does, that you describe, but I can't cope with the crazy stuff, then probably Short Sun is not going to be something that scratches your itch. It is complicated and confusing. You don't always know what's happening or who's speaking or how it connects in the timeline or whatever. These are things he trusts his audience to deal with, because the searching is part of the point. There is a pilgrimage of the reader as well as of the characters, but it's well worth it if you're into that. To say, if you want a taste but not go that deep, read Fifth Head of Cerberus, read Peace, maybe read Book of the New Sun. But if you are initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, then pushing through to the Short Sun is well worth it. And it was very much, it was a profound experience. I think many of these books touched me deeply, communicated important ideas, had exciting plots, were funny. But I think Book of the Short Sun is more than any of them. Memory came close at points, but more than any of these books, Book of the Short Sun is something which I found just personally very profound. So those are my top 10 books or series or whatever of the year. I'd love to hear some of your favourite books you read in 2023, and I'll do a TBR or something soon as well, and I'll see you next time.